Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about this obscure little console. You probably like 3 people out there have ever heard of it. Of course, it's the, what was it called? The PlayStation. Obviously, one of history's most infamous consoles. And specifically, we'll be talking about the XStation, which is an ODE that we've installed into it. Before we do that, though, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before. Follow me on all the social media stuff. It's in the description: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, all that. And if you don't mind, check out my new channel called Flying and Eating, which is all about adventuring, flying, eating stuff, and me getting fatter. I'm sure you'll have a good time. Anyway, so this video, yes, we are going to be talking about the XStation, and I want to give a huge shout out to Castlemania Games because they were cool enough to provide the XStation for purposes of review so that we could all talk about it right now. And I want to get another shout out to my buddy Jesse, who was the guy who actually installed it. So, if you've never heard of this, what is the basic idea? Well, a lot of our older CD-based consoles now have new things called ODEs, which stands for Optical Disc Emulator. The idea is that you remove the disk drive out of the console and replace it with this new ODE board. Once you've done that, the ODE board traditionally supports SD cards. Sometimes, depending on which type of ODE you have, it can support things like hard drives or other USB interfaces, but traditionally it's SD cards. In this case, it definitely is SD cards. Once you've installed all that, you can put games on an SD card, put it into the device, turn the console on, and then boom, play all your games off an SD card instead of using the original disk drive. While there's mixed feelings on this concept, I want you guys to know in advance this console was saved by it because its disk drive was completely dead. No matter what we did, we couldn't get it to work, so now the console lives again. So again, huge shout out to Castlemania Games for that, and if you like this or any of the other stuff that he has, by all means, I'll put a link in the description. Go support him, pick this up. I think you'll like it. But let's just get this out of the way. Obviously, this is not an installation video as the thing is already in there, but it is not an easy installation. It is certainly something I could never have done. I could not. It's not a simple pop in and plug in type of thing. This requires extreme soldering skills. There's a lot of work involved in this, and Sony didn't help because the XStation, I mean, it's only compatible with certain models of the PS1. You might look at a PS1 and think they all look the same. There's this one and there's the PS1, you know? But that's not the case. Under the hood, Sony did like 1 million revisions. And so there's only specific models that are actually compatible with the XStation. So all that information is available on the XStation's website. So you can see exactly which models work and which ones you know, if you have or don't have, that you might actually make this happen with. So in my case, I had 2 PS1s. I had my childhood one, and I had this one I rescued at a Goodwill. I actually did a video on it years ago. I did a cleaning video on it. Eventually, both lasers died in each console. I brought it to my buddy Jesse. He was able to fix my childhood one, but the other one, he's like, it kind of reads discs, but not really, and eventually it just crapped out entirely. There was nothing we could really do about it. Well, fast forward to the XStation. It was delivered to Jesse. He went ahead and installed it because he's got amazing skills, and now that it's in there, we're good to go. So once you actually have it, what's it like to use it? Well, pretty simple. So what you're going to want to do from that point onward is you're going to want to take care of the SD card. Now, in my case, I used a 512 gigabyte Samsung SD card, which we formatted to exFAT. Now, there's actually a specific tool that's best for this. It's called like SD card formatter. I'll put, again, a link in the description to it. While technically you could just format the card on a computer and just be done with it, this is recommended as not only does it format it for you, but it even adjusts the cluster sizes specifically for the XStation so that it's most likely to be compatible with everything. The XStation boasts 100% compatibility with the entirety of the PS1 game library, and while I don't have it, it does have additional features for the HDMI mod. I believe Dan Koons made one called the PS1 Digital, and it actually has additional capabilities with that, but I in no way, shape, or form can show you that as I don't have that particular modification. But yeah, it's got a whole host of features. It supports exFAT as well as FAT32, but again, exFAT is recommended, again, with that particular software. Once it's done all that at that point you really have to do is throw on some files, which are again available at XStation's website. They're basically, you know, not BIOS files, but just like setup files, as well as new firmware. And once you boot up the console, which we'll just go ahead and do right here, right now, you'll be presented eventually with its menu. For the purposes of this video, I have disabled sound so that, you know, we can have a more clear conversation. But you can hear that sound. I know you can if you're a child of the 90s. If it works correctly, you'll get this screen, and then from there it'll boot into its own little menu here. So its menu is very simple, and as you can see, I've made various folders on it. The folder you're not seeing is actually, there's a folder, it's called like 00 XStation or something like that. It's, again, you don't have to name it this, it's all in the files. But you put that in there along with the firmware updates and all that sort of stuff, and then from there you would want to go in and hit options. Now currently, at the time I make this video, this is the most active current firmware. However, if you're putting this on for the first time, or if there's a new firmware update, you put that in the root of the SD card, and then once you boot up the console, you would go down to update firmware and just proceed with that process, which is very simple as it does all of the work. I can't show you that specifically because this is already up to date. But you know, once that's all done, you know, you're pretty much ready to roll, and then you can make folders however you like. Now, this is a matter of organization and it's personal preference. You don't really have to do this any one particular way. In my case, I decided to split it by region: American games, European games, Game Shark, and we'll get back to that, and Japanese games. And then from there, it's up to you. Now, I made individual folders for every single game. So the reason I did that, we'll use the Japanese games as an example. So if you look through here, this is like all my Japanese like original games. I've ripped all my own discs. Now, you don't have to do that. Legally you do. But you could sail the high seas of the internet, let's put it that way, if you really want to. And if you do all that, you have to have the games in one of three formats. Either bin-Q, which is all my own rips, ISO, or CCD, as in clone CD. It'll recognize all three of those, and that's great because that allows for a lot of compatibility. And then you can put them in there as raw files. Again, I don't recommend that. I would put them and give each single game a directory, and especially because of multi-disc functionality. So there's a game called Kowloon's Gate. Now this particular game happens to be 4 discs, so having them all in the same folder just makes sense. But that would apply to anything. You know, it doesn't matter if it's your Metal Gear Solid or Gran Turismo 2, your Final Fantasies, or any of that sort of stuff. It's best to, in my opinion, to have them all kind of, you know, grouped together. But again, that's all personal preference. You can literally do this however you want. But you're probably wondering, like, how does it do disk swapping? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But I think that we can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone on this, which is to also talk about Game Shark. Now, if you like Game Shark, if you grew up with it, it actually does support this, and it supports it in 2 different ways, which is kind of neat. Now, this is an actual Game Shark like card that you would stick in the back of the console in the serial port. Now, Sony never actually used that serial port, so they eventually phased it out entirely, and thus Game Shark had to change their approach. This actually does work. This is the one I got as a kid. So what would happen if I plugged this in first is you would get a Game Shark screen. You would pick whichever game you intended to play. Let's say, in my case, Twisted Metal 2, one of my all-time favorites. I would pick that. Then it would boot up to the menu here for the XStation. And then from there, you go and you find your copy of Twisted Metal 2. You start it. Boom, you're good to go. And the codes will be active. However, with Game Shark, it's typically recommended to get the most recent version, even if the most recent version was last updated like a quarter of a century ago. It's still, like anything with firmware, is best to go that way. So the alternate method you've got is the disc-based version. So right there, you've got a disc and you've got this little card. Now, obviously, it can't read discs anymore, but that's okay because we have ripped the disc. But there is a little glitch with that, which is you actually do require this particular memory card, which I only have because I actually own the original set. Now, there might be hacked versions of that. I really don't know. There might also be ways to duplicate the files of this and put them on a standard memory card or the Mem Card Pro, which we'll get back to. But I don't know. All I know for my purposes is that I have it, and therefore we can show it. So in my case, we will pick on Game Shark. Open it there. Now you'll notice down at the bottom there's this thing that says Add to Playlist. So we're going to click on that, which is just a square, and then go back, and we're going to pick the game we want, which in our case is going to be Twisted Metal 2. So we'll go all the way down to the bottom. We'll find Twisted Metal 2. We'll open that. See, these are all individual folders. And then we'll open that. And then from there, you just press start, and it's going to load the whole sequence. So it loads Game Shark first and then is prepared for Twisted Metal 2 as soon as you give it the command to switch to that disc. So in this case, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. Put in the little memory card there. Give it a second to recognize it. You have Game Shark found, which again, that's why you need that. Otherwise you get an error that makes it not work. Select our cheat codes. Twisted Metal 2 is right there. We will go ahead. We've got 3 codes active. I think we'll just go with those. Press start, and then says, you know, start game with codes. Now here's where it goes like, okay, you need to put in the disk, and you're like, well, how do I do that? Then how do I switch it? They couldn't have made this easier. Okay, it's open. It's closed. That's it. It just knows to go to the next disk once you do that. It's kind of, it's a smart little trick. But anyway, now it's going to go ahead and recognize Twisted Metal 2 and then start up the game. Now, the codes I believe I had active were like Minion and Sweet Tooth are already pre-unlocked, and I think you have like player has infinite health or whatever. We're not going to sit here and play it extensively or anything. I just wanted to give you guys a sense of what it looks like when it boots up. But yeah, so if Minion and Sweet Tooth are there in the player's menu, then we know the codes worked. And I think, yep, there you go. So that character only exists because of Game Shark actually functioning. So we'll go ahead and tell it to start, and then I believe with invincibility and all that, the character should just never die no matter what I do. So I'll just ignore it, and the character theoretically will never die. Now I showed you that so that A, you can see that Game Shark does in fact function, and B, so that you can see that how the multi-disc swapping works. So again, if you were to play like Metal Gear Solid, at the end of the first disc, when you go down those stairs and it says to swap to disc 2, you would just lift it up and then close it again, as long as you preset it up. That's really the key. Or if you were to do the thing where it's like, did you save, and then you have to load your save once you get to the next disc. You could do it either way. This is just the kind of easier method. Yeah, so right there, as you can see, he's not dying, and I should have infinite specials. Yes, I think I do. I can't really see what I'm doing from this angle, but theoretically it should be fine. Now, load times. Here's the thing. The load times are better than they are off of a disc, but they're not exceptionally better. It basically goes to the absolute cap of the disc's ability and then just a little over. It's not like the Dreamcast GDMU or the mode where it was noticeably better. This is just like a marginal improvement. I'm not really sure why that is. It's probably some sort of limitation of the PS1 itself, but either way, it clearly works, and it's quite nice. It also is region free, which was kind of, I think, what you kind of guessed when you saw the Japanese and the European folder there. So yeah, you can tell I'm clearly not dying. So let's turn that off. Now, once you turn it off completely, it will hard reset, so it's not going to just by default boot back into Game Shark unless you have it connected again, which we're not going to do. But it does have options like reloading the previous save. So if you actually were to check out the SD card that's in the thing, and then you check out that XStation folder, it has these little TXT files that just are little commands in the event that you choose to do it. So right now, it's just going to take us to the menu. But if I wanted to, I think I could just press start and just resume the exact same queue we had set up, which was Game Shark plus Twisted Metal 2. So basically, until you change it, it's still the default. But I thought rather than go over that, we'll go over a couple of the options. Now, I talked imports. Yes, it plays the Japanese games, no problem. Again, this is an American PS1, and both the US and Japan use NTSC-U, well, NTSC-U and NTSC-J, but they're the same video frequency, or video standard. The European ones do work, but they can be a little odd, so I thought I would show you this, because if you guys saw my hacked PS3 video, then you know I was having issues with that. I could get all the PS3 games to run, all the PS2 games to run. I could get American and Japanese PS1 games, but European PS1 games, I was having issues with video frequency. This doesn't have that problem. Well, it does, but it handles it. But before we do that, let me just show you the menu just so you can see if there's anything else kind of worth looking at here. You can change the video mode. I have it set to NTSC. However, you can change it to PAL if you're in Europe and you do want to do this. You can also set it to automatic. You can tell it to show up to that loader menu or just have it go to the previous, just have it by default boot into the games. I would keep it to the loader menu just so you don't have a hard time getting back to this menu when you want to change stuff. You can change background things. I put it in the dark mode. Or there's a light mode. I think there's a blue mode too. Folder browsing, this is to refresh game list if you added a bunch of stuff and they're not populating, that sort of stuff. It's a lot of just little basic things. It's nothing super intense or anything like that. But anyway, so you get a sense of that. Now if we click on the game,
Chaos Break, we can tell it to start, or we can look at a couple more options. Again, add to the queue, which we were just talking about. There's a bunch of information about memory cards, which again, we're gonna get back to. Then you have fast load and full load, and then individual options. The options are just what you saw before. What's key about fast load versus full load is, I thought maybe it took advantage of the hardware and it pushed it more when you did fast load. All it really does with fast load is, you saw when we first turned it on, you guys saw that infamous PS1 booting up screen, and then it's followed by that secondary boot up screen. If you do fast load, it just never does that. If you do full load, then it shows that sequence. So for example, if we just hit fast load, you can see it's just going to bypass that entirely and go straight into the game, which is in this case what we want. But again, this is a PAL game now running on an NTSC console, and this is where you might see some oddities. So when we see this opening FMV sequence, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. So you can see this is here, and look how it's kind of showing image at the top, and then there's just nothing in between. This, yeah, see that? You can definitely notice when it's white like that. That's like basically a conversion issue, going from 50 hertz to 60 hertz when it's not really meant to do that. In this case, in this particular game, it doesn't render the game unplayable, but it does create some video oddity. All I'm trying to say is, within the game, it doesn't really seem to matter much, but just be aware that technically that's a thing. It supports it, but it doesn't force it into NTSC. It just kind of forces it to work, if that makes any sense, if you follow my logic. This is actually a really cool game, and I'm glad it works. This was basically a Resident Evil clone that was unique to the PS1. It was released in Japan, it was released in Europe, but North America never got it. The advantage of the European version, though, is it's 100% in English. The Japanese version, it's like the audio's in English, but all the text is in Japanese. But see, like that, all that text is in English here. Cool game, actually. But that's not really the point. The last thing that we're going to talk about here before we go is the Mem Card Pro. Now, I actually, I did an entire video on this thing. It's a cool little device. It is essentially the ultimate memory card for the PS1. But if you saw that video, you remember it all, one of the biggest issues was simply, it wasn't even an issue, it was just an acknowledgement that they really designed this not for a standard PS1. Certainly it would work, but where it shines is when it's connected to a PS1 that has the XStation specifically with it. And the reason for that is, so the XStation in concept, you could have every single game ever made on one machine on one card, right? Now, that's a lot of games, which means that's a lot of memory cards. Now, the Mem Card Pro is designed to be compatible with the XStation, and so what it does is when it detects any given game, it would actually populate on the screen down there. In fact, it says XStation right now because it knows what it is. And it will create eight memory cards. I'm not joking. 8 memory cards for every individual game. Once you start a game, it creates 8 cards, which may sound ridiculously excessive because it is, but at the same time, the file sizes are so small versus what an SD card is now capable of holding, you'll never even know it. So every time you boot up a game, let's say I booted up Silent Hill, it would create 8 memory card slots for Silent Hill. And then you can manually cycle through them if you somehow actually use all 8, or even all just one. You could just cycle. It's enough storage. You'll never have that problem, but either way it can do it. And then when you boot up a new game, let's say, you know, a Final Fantasy game or whatever, the card goes, okay, that's not Silent Hill. It'll either create an entirely new set of Final Fantasy, or it'll be like, oh, I remember when you played Final Fantasy, let me just pull those right up here. So either way, all I'm trying to say is, this card with the XStation are a match made in heaven, because they basically sync to each other, and you have all the games ever with essentially infinite storage to play them. That's why it matters, and it's all done automatically. It just swaps between each one. You don't have to do anything. That's the best part about it, and it's really nice to see it finally get to shine like that, because when I was using it originally, you still had to do everything manually, because if you're playing off the disc, there just isn't the extra hardware there telling the Mem Card Pro what to do, whereas the XStation is. So they just complement each other very, very well. And that's pretty much it. The obvious downside to this thing, I mean, you have to sacrifice your disk drive. However, a lot of PS1's disk drives don't work in the first place. This one certainly didn't, so no problem. It got saved. The only other... there might be some suggestions I would give them if they are even possible to fix through firmware. The most
key one, though. I mean, the PAL thing would be nice if it wasn't having what minor display issues it's having. That's just a whatever. But the biggest one, though, would be, it would be nicer if you didn't have to kind of do these weird hoops to make something like Game Shark work. If XStation had its own, basically, Game Shark clone built into it, its own cheat database, I think that would be quite cool. But beyond that, I don't really have any suggestions. You know, it played everything I wanted it to play. It really had no other types of problems. It loads everything more efficiently. Yeah, overall, highly recommended as a product, but the actual installation process, woof, that's a different one. That's up to you to decide if you can handle it or not. So, yeah, if you want the XStation, again, I'll put a link in the description to Castlemania Games. You can go ahead and pick it up there. But I would recommend finding someone who knows how to install this. My buddy Jesse did a fantastic job. He lives out in the Bay Area in California. I'm sure he would do it. But there are people that can do that installation, but it's a pain. And you have to have the right version of the console. In Jesse's case, like, he had a stack of PS1s that he was just like, maybe I have another one, maybe we could tinker and just see. It's like we only found like one that was compatible with it. Like, lucky enough, you know, mine was fine. We didn't have that problem. But be aware, it's very particular about which versions it supports. And I don't know if there's any great solution to that other than just making more versions of the XStation. But, you know, we'll see. There are other ODE options, but XStation, especially when combined with the Mem Card Pro, is just amazing. Now, all I need for this thing is the HDMI, you know, PS1 digital out of it, and it's just like, oh, man, that's your childhood, but like reborn. That's what that is. But anyway, guys, thank you guys very much for watching. Again, if you could please like the video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that, hit me up on the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, all that. And again, check out my new channel. I would really appreciate that as well. Thank you guys very much for watching, and thank you very much, Castlemania Games, and I'll see you all later.